All right, this was way too good. I just couldn't. I just couldn't even wait. And then I was watching the quartering covering the Dave Chappelle show, and how it's just this giant fatty that gets arrested and then has a blog about her fatness and how she's all fucked up and can't catches all the diseases, but she can't get on disability because people are like, all you are is just really fat and insane. It's like we need to start people. We need cuckoo houses again. We obviously need the cuckoo people to be separated, and so this is one of the things I'm going to get into. Congratulations, Portland. You have now a homicide rate that's hopping like literally like what was it, 1% a day over the year prior. You're at now something like 230% rise in homicides over the last 2 years. Congratulations. A city with only about 4% of the population being black Americans, in a state that now no longer requires graduates of high school to be able to read at an adult level or do algebra, because people of color, something that has to do with people of color, getting the legislator meeting to solve problems, say quickly, doing something quickly, this was literally said by a white man, is white supremacy. So dragging your feet, sucking your teeth, kicking up dust, cussing, and making a fuss. White liberals have fundamentally said to be niggardly and to be drug-addled, irreverent, incapable of reading. Incapable of reading. These are children of color in Portland, in Oregon, in all these cities, Springfield, Eugene, Ashland. They have to go to school. Education is like, it's considered one, just untoward. You wouldn't educate your child. It would be uncivilized, untoward. People would look at you strangely. Remember, it's only within about the last 20 years that homeschooling hasn't been something that people are like, oh, whatever you do, don't ever, oh no, homeschooling, oh my god, make your kid turn out like a fucking weirdo. And now we understand, no, it makes actually your child extremely normal, and everybody else is so fucked up that they have a hard time dealing with all these fucked up ass people who don't act like adults because they've been around their peers in school. They haven't been around adults. See, homeschooled kids often are around adults, so they start behaving like an adult. And that really fucks with people, that they're extremely adult. But also they don't know the social cues of the poorly socialized public school students. But beyond just some of what I've been thinking about Portland, and this is the beauty too now. So all that said, so now you don't have to know how to read. Your white child doesn't have to know how to read because, well, black people, even though from what I know about Oregon, Hispanics are a larger number of people of color, but they would be second and third generation at inordinately large numbers. Like, so if they're 13% of the population here, probably about 9% are people who are second and third generation or greater. They're not any longer, their name is not Gallegos, it's Gallegos. That kind of thing, they say Fuentes. It's Fuentes, but they say Fuentes. So, see, that kind of thing. Martin, Martinez, Martinez. It's very anglicized. Um, so that this idea that Native Americans also, I think, make up either the equivalent number of as black people, or again greater, like 8% of the population. So it's something. I think they're still a larger group than black Americans in Oregon. Oregon's one of the whitest states in the union. So the notoriously violent areas of Portland that have exploded into more gun violence. Well, you see, what it is about 40% of the shootings. The whole shebang. It's black guys shooting black guys. This is about 40% of the shootings going on up there now. So, what's happening? Measure 114. Where you'll have to go to gun class, and it changes. You can't have magazines. It's literally a list of things that are unconstitutional, that are now unconstitutional fundamentally. And this will die. This will, as soon as the lawsuits happen, this will die. But it's probably going to be put to the vote. And I'm thinking it probably won't pass, actually, because there's just too many people now. There's too much indication that too many people have bought firearms, even in Oregon, and that and that Oregon really, even people who vote Democratic are like, no, okay, you got to get over this thing about guns. It's no, you just got to get over it. So it's almost entirely, as any cluster. It's almost entirely a black American thing. In literally a neighborhood, with being that this is like 4% of the population of the whole state, and they're pretty much clustered in one neighborhood in Portland. You could do something about the shootings. No, but you see, that's Mayor Ted Wheeler, and Ted Wheeler is a typical Northwestern white liberal male coward. Typical coward. They're cowardly men. Inferior, cowardly men who can't deal with the statistics. They can't deal with it because that would be the observational end of science. And there's an infection in this region of the country that came from the hippies and came from the shithead, drug-addled leftists of scientism. That's why you get the climate change thing won't end until Republicans punish Oregon and punish Washington schools, until you start punishing them. So you mock them. You have to mock Oregon for being full of the dumbest liberals in the country. You have to. You can't let it slide. You must constantly, no, at least it's not Oregon. You have to actually come up with, then dressing truly like shit, and that character is always the Oregon liberal. This white guy who literally walks around with a noose around his own neck, and it's and he's like, I wear this because in solidarity with the black man, and it's and something like that, because that would just be so utterly beta, and just where even black people would be like, wait, nigga, what, but that would be very Oregon. And then when it's summertime, he still wears the noose around his neck, but you see he wears whatever hippie gear he's wearing, but then a leather trench coat. Because Oregon is leather trench coat in the summer land. There is always some wacko who has to wear a trench coat in the summer. That's how it is. And they're a commie, and that guy's a commie. He even has commie buttons from the commie era, and because I'm a commie. Whoa, isn't that edgy? Like drugs and Led Zeppelin. I swear to God, it's that fucking cringe, dude. It's that cringe. And there's times where when I finally met people who I'm trying to be cool, and Oh, I know they're so fucking cringe. This guy's not that bad. He's really cringeworthy. He doesn't understand. He's from here, dude. I know. He doesn't get it. You know, he's he's fucking whack. He's the wackest MC ever, but he doesn't understand. It's the wackest act ever. All right. Curse of the Ghetto Golems by David Cole at Tacky's magazine. Truly a great periodical, up there with that such as Stuff Black People Don't Like and The Dare. Eat shit if you don't like it. Because you see, knowing what your critics think is knowledge. Gollum tales always follow the same template. A Jew builds a monster of clay to destroy his enemies, but in the end, the golem turns on its creator. In 2019, in a piece that generated unintended national controversy, I wrote about immigration golems. This week I'll examine the homegrown ones. George Soros is a golem creator extraordinaire, an atheist Jew who fancies neither Israel nor communism. Technically, neither or. Okay, but anyway, Soros defies at least from what I recall about the way that, yeah. Soros defies the easy anti-Jewish conspiracy theory stereotypes, but in fact, Soros is not difficult to understand. He's defined by his youth in World War II Hungary, watching with pride as his father outsmarted the Nazis, keeping his family out of the camps and providing forged papers to keep other Jews out of the camps. Soros frequently describes the war years as his happiest, and he's lived a life of trying to replicate those years. He still sees himself as under occupation by Gentile racists. Hungarian Jews during the war were not like Polish Jews. They weren't impoverished and ghettoized. They were prosperous and integrated. Hence, Soros's personal prosperity doesn't lessen his fantasy. He doesn't associate occupation with destitution. There's still a Reich to defeat, and the Nazi fighting torch has passed from father to son. To battle his present-day imaginary Nazis, Soros has constructed an assembly line of black golems. He's devoted his fortune, $32 billion just since 2017, to shielding black criminals from prosecution and incarceration. Every day in cities across the U.S., black thugs with Soros-bought immunity from consequence venture forth to murder, steal, rape, and assault. For Soros, this is war, and every murder committed by one of his blacks is its own mini Dresden, another blow against fascist Western Christendom. Now let's compare Soros with another influential leftist Jew, one whose motivations were spelled out in a tell-all book by his daughter, Herbert Aptheker. 1915 through 2003 was a wealthy Brooklynite and one of the most prominent American communists of the 20th century, a friend and benefactor to Angela Davis and dozens of lesser black revolutionaries. Aptheker devoted his life to encouraging black militancy and pushing blacks to burn down the system. He even authored what could be considered the 20th century version of the 1619 Project in an effort to encourage black radicalism. We know what drove Aptheker because his daughter Bettina wrote extensively about it in her autobiography. My father rejected Judaism as a religious practice in the face of the Holocaust, detesting what he saw as the acquiescence of the Jewish people in their own destruction and the failure of any God, Jewish or otherwise, to stop such a catastrophe. I've heard this too when I was younger. I am still searching my mind for where I first heard a similar thing. This is one of the most important things I've probably ever read on this channel. My mother hated the Hasids. When she saw one on the street, she would sputter and curse, nearly spitting in her rage. I want to make sure this is also clear. I have quite literally witnessed that. Jews who hate Hasids, who hate them to the point where you could tell this is a hatred that borders on rage and violence. And that there's this sort of just utter hatred of like the Orthodox, the ultra Orthodox. Like they're just like having, all they do is stay on welfare and have kids. Now, people might say, well, that's not exactly wrong, blah, 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 but I just want to make sure everybody understands that these very kind of moderate, civilized people in Tel Aviv, that was in Tel Aviv when I was there. That was like a normal family in Ramat Gan. What I found interesting is the people that didn't feel this way. And these were people that, like, they were, yeah, it was like the American from Brooklyn. She wasn't Orthodox, but she had, you know, it wasn't the same. She didn't have the same point of view. It was these folks from continental Europe. They had more of that kind of point of view. These religious zealots. In the land of Israel, all those religious zealots breeding like rabbits. Just so people understand what's really, what's what. Her fury frightened me. She despised even the most reformed expressions of Jewish religion. Referring to anything religious with bitter sarcasm and contempt, Zionism was unmentionable. My father had substituted black people for Jews in his work. Remember what I said about Gershwin and his nigger keys? That's a quote. It's a quote. That is, he made black people larger than life by erasing their foibles and failures. This was to compensate for his deep shame about the way he believed the Jews had acted during the Holocaust. What we have with Aptheker and Soros is the same but different. Two atheist Jews hostile to faith and unmoved by Zionism, seeking vengeance for the Holocaust, using blacks as proxy soldiers. But whereas Soros's Holocaust origin story is one of pride in his father's accomplishments, and desire to carry on his family's noble Nazi-fighting heritage, Aptheker's is one of shame the perceived failures and weaknesses of his fellow Jews. Aptheker rallied against Jewish Holocaust collaborators. As Bettina tells it, he despised Jews who had collaborated with the Nazis, even though that collaboration often involved very complicated circumstances still. These instances of collaboration seem to be the entirety of my father's focus, the place of his guilt and rage. Soros is exactly one of those complicated collaborators. As a teen under Nazi occupation, he masqueraded as a Gentile and even assisted in confiscating the belongings of deported Jews. Studying how Aptheker, architect of 1960s black political violence, and Soros, architect of post-2000 unconstrained black street violence, are the same but different, is edifying. Aptheker, tormented by self-loathing which he visited upon his daughter via beatings and sexual molestation. This is another thing I want to make sure to touch on. Have you ever noticed how white liberals and irreligious Jews love talking about religious white Americans as people who molest their children? That there's something about religion that causes people to molest their children. It's taken me a long time. I think there's a ton of projection going on. A ton of it. Because people who tend toward communism are unstable because all socialist epistemology is bereft of the capacity for proof. Marx made claims about economics that he could not have had data for. There's also stuff that he brought up that it was just fundamentally just wrong about the development of human civilization. And so his epistemology was incorrect. So that's why it's one of the most destructive. Socialism is one of the greatest and most destructive forces known to humankind. I mean, once you start down the road of socialism, the likelihood that you're going to have civil war and starvation, like, just starts. It rises literally as long as socialism is there. It rises until you hit it, because that's what it is. It's actually the political system of unstable, self-destructive people who are just kind of full of rage and want to see people suffer. They really kind of have this thing about, we must suffer, and that this somehow balances the scales of justice in their Hegelian universe. And so I just want to, I've just encountered this way too many times. And finally I just had to sit there and be like, no, this is some uncomfortable truth that a lot of people just don't want to deal with. That there's just a lot of people that blame, that they want to think religious people are like that. And it's like, no, I think that was probably your family. And yeah, and you're probably a mutant. That's why you hate normal people who are happy. Okay. In Black's, Aptheker saw fearless warriors who could fight the Nazis as Jews should have. Soros, on the other hand, sees his stock as good and noble, canny survivors who beat the Nazis then and will do so again now. To Aptheker, Blacks are to be idealized, the true Ubermenschen. To Soros, Blacks are a tool, no more superior than a hammer. Aptheker and Soros traveled different roads, albeit from the same starting point, the Holocaust, and to the same conclusion, Blacks as instruments. Two golem builders, but with different blueprints. Aptheker, a doctrinaire communist, didn't just want his black golems to wreak destruction. Sure, that was a part of it, but they were also supposed to build a Marxist utopia. Aptheker lived to see the death of that dream. Bettina's book details her dad's disillusionment as his black revolutionaries drifted from ideological violence to common thuggery. But surely Soros, who expects nothing of his blacks but common thuggery, must be quite satisfied with his golems. Are they not giving the Creator exactly what he desires? Whereas Aptheker tried to turn blacks into disciplined political partisans, armed not only with guns but with the teachings of Mao, Soros has no desire to do any reading rainbow bullshit. He doesn't want to teach them or change them. He wants to unleash what's already inside them. Go be your worst, you, and I'll ensure there are no consequences. That's what BLM was. All a fucking operation. And black people stepped right into the trap. And now, the whole world is seeing it. It doesn't matter ideologically, none of that matters. They are not going into those fucking neighborhoods. If they are tourists, they're going to look out for people. Low effort, high yielding goleming. So how can it go wrong? Well, we're seeing how right now. Soros has recently suffered several key defeats, one of which is guaranteed you haven't heard about. We'll start with that one. Soros is like an online pedophile, but instead of for trolling for small children, he looks for useful Negroes. About 10 years ago, he thought he'd found a good one. Reverend William Barber was, we'll get to that, president of the North Carolina NAACP, the largest chapter in the South and the second largest nationwide. Since 2001, Barber, a man of most generous girth, known locally as Round Rev, has been saddled with a troublesome underling, Reverend Curtis Gatewood, president of the Durham branch and second vice president in the North Carolina NAACP Conference of Branches. Gatewood, achieved notoriety after 9/11 for essentially saying Whitey deserved to get blowed up, and since then he's wished death or hosted those who wish death upon whites, cops, Jews, Israel, Asians, Latinos, and even Obama for not being radical enough. The NAACP wanted Gatewood gone, and as he was saying way too many quiet parts out loud. But year after year, Barber withstood the pressure to fire him, and the more Barber defied the national office, the more popular he grew at home. This attracted Soros's attention. An NAACP state president willing to defend a kill Whitey maniac against the entire NAACP leadership. A 2016 hack of Soros.org documents revealed that Barber was specifically targeted by Soros for grooming. Soros put Barber on the payroll, and the two of them secretly funneled money to Gatewood's HK-on-J subgroup, a more radical NAACP appendage. Flush with Soros' cash, Barber took some steps toward greater radicalism, fomenting local civil unrest, inflaming anti-cop sentiment. But this year it all came crashing down in spectacular fashion. Long story short, in between killing Whitey, Gatewood was chasing booty, sexually harassing his branch's female members. Thinking with the eggplant. Don't think with the fucking eggplant. At first, Barber covered for him, but when enough magic black girls demanded action, the national NAACP finally had an excuse to dump both loose cannons. Without looking weak on the Whitey question, Barber resigned, and Gatewood was sacked. Always the rational one, Gatewood, furious at Barber for not protecting him better, accused Barber of financial mismanagement as a state president, which led to a media investigation and the revelation the Round Rev may have been pocketing much of the Soros lucre that was supposed to have gone to rioting. Soros lost control of the North Carolina chapter. Worse still, he realized his useful Negro had played him for a chump. That was June. The same month, Soros lost his favorite minion, Verboten, in San Francisco. This month, Soros lost Marilyn Mosby, his Baltimore City State's Attorney, and it looks like his hand-picked Baltimore County State's Attorney candidate Robbie Leonard is going to lose as well. On top of that, the recall of LA DA George Gascon looks likely to make the ballot. Barber, Gatewood, Mosby, Bowden, and probably Leonard and Gascon. 6 losses in a month. What gives? Soros's golems aren't behaving. In North Carolina, Soros paid for riots. Gatewood used that money to chase skirts, and Barber used it for his $3,000 a day barbecue rib habit. Soros chose Mosby to rain more death and disorder upon Baltimore, if that's even possible, but spent her days skimming, for which she's been federally indicted. Soros poured millions into BLM, and what did he get? A bunch of LaQueenies buying mansions with their baby daddies. Ironically, post-Floyd riot fervor was lessened, not furthered, by Soros's money, and the money from all the other gullible leftists who donated in 2020. The gravy train distracted BLM leadership from actual activism. Remember that prior to Floyd's death, the weave-wearing heifers who came to lead BLM were busting up fast food joints because they fries be cold. Soros thought he could throw money at that trash and get disciplined partisans. In return, Aptheker's error repeated. Okay, what about Bowden, Gascon, and Leonard, who aren't black? There's no money malfeasance there. What they did exactly as ordered, using black criminals to sow mayhem. Yeah, too much mayhem. Whereas the ideological black golems took the money and ran, the thuggish black golems were incapable of showing restraint once incarceration was taken off the table. Too many murders, too many assaults, and Soros thought he could rely on his golems to go slow enough to avoid backlash. He was wrong. LA, SF, and Baltimore will tolerate a lot from blacks. When you alienate those cities, you know your golems have gone too far. Soros is a dinosaur, as was Aptheker. Jews with vendettas rooted in the Holocaust and romanticized visions of using blacks as proxies, like it's 1955 when black leftists were deferential and the most radical thing you could call them was equal. Now, what every black has to be called magic and brilliant, and now that blacks have had a taste of progressive prosecution, decarceration, defunded and defanged police, and zero consequence rioting, the ghetto golems have become uncontrollable. In Jewish literature, that's always where the story ends. Now in real life, we get to see what comes next. Lucky us. Long live the Republic.